Welcome to All Souls Forum. I'm Spencer Graves, a member of the Forum Committee at All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church here in Kansas City. Since 1943, this forum has provided a platform for important conversations to promote critical thinking on the most compelling and challenging issues of our day, especially those that involve ethical values in the contemporary world. Today, Henry Stover and Cris Mann, co-chairs of PeaceWorks Kansas City, will discuss resisting nuclear armament in 2022. First, however, I wish to disclose that I have a conflict of interest in organizing this talk because I'm the secretary of PeaceWorks Kansas City. And before I turn it over to Henry and Cris, I wish to confirm to our audience that PeaceWorks Kansas City is an organization of scofflaws. I got arrested with 16 others on Memorial Day 2019 for trespassing on the Kansas City National Security Campus, which makes 85% of the non-nuclear parts for US nuclear weapons. Henry always calls the police to tell them we are coming. He does that for two reasons. Most importantly, when law enforcement is confronted with an unpleasant surprise, they sometimes overreact in ways that are not good. Second, it would not do to go there to get arrested, only to find that there were no law enforcement officers to arrest us. Henry, Cris?
Thank you, All Souls, for inviting us to this forum. I've been a member of All Souls since 2013, and All Souls has played a vital role in the peace and justice discussions of our city for many, many years. I would like to point out that today's Sunday, Kansas City Star has my letter to the editor entitled Make Peace. And it states President John F. Kennedy in 1961 at the United Nations warned us nuclear weapons are a clear and present danger to all life, whether used by accident, miscalculation, or madness. Particularly now, the imminence of war in Ukraine, Russia, Belarus should require Russian President Vladimir Putin, US President Joe Biden, and other key officials to meet inside the damaged Chernobyl reactor site to focus their minds on the possibility of great disaster. A peaceful and just resolution of this crisis is possible. We, the people, must demand this. And as a Lenten sign, we should wear ashen crosses, foreheads, to remember we all could be dust. Signed, Henry M. Stover, co-chair of PeaceWorks. And this is like so critical right now, what is going on. We all have in common the desire to live, whether we are liberals, whether we are extremists, right or left, whether we're environmentalists or so forth. And the question was, what do we have in common? Well, the answer is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, states our Declaration of Independence, and it states that they are part of our inalienable rights. And of course, life, liberty, and property is stated in our U.S. Constitution. We want justice, moral and ethical compass, and our honor, integrity, and therefore we demand that we speak up and that we act up against weapons of mass destruction, weapons of genocide, and the possibility of extinction. We are only doing this as a natural duty to guard all humanity. And what President Kennedy, the warning that he gave at the United Nations, that was 60 years ago, and yet we still are locked in this peril. And that is why some things need to be done. And that's partly why I engage in civil disobedience. Some people call it CD. I've been an attorney for 40 years. I've been I am a conscientious objector to all wars, one passionate for human rights, one who deeply cares for family and friends and for this planet, as a member of PeaceWorks, etc. I want to make a distinction. These are acts by members of PeaceWorks and by other concerned citizens. This is not the official platform of PeaceWorks itself. PeaceWorks and Missouri Peace Foundation are corporate entities. These are individual acts of conscience. I personally feel that I am like a POW, a prisoner of war, or that I am sitting on death row. And that is because these superpowers hold us hostage. They possess these nuclear weapons. They're modernizing these nuclear weapons. They are really, in effect, changing what some of these treaties were involved with. And so we are living in a state of terrorism by these nuclear nation states. And so PeaceWorks Kansas City is really the only organization locally that has taken on the task of exposing and resisting the nuclear weapon parts that are made at the south end of Kansas City, south end of Jackson County. And when you would go on their website some years ago, they were more than delighted, I think boast, that they made 85% of the parts of a nuclear weapon. The triggering system, the guidance system, the interior, the exterior. In effect, they make the gun, the bullet, the nuclear bullet is placed elsewhere. Our group has also been involved in a federal lawsuit to challenge the environmental standards for the new plant. We've collected signatures to have a petition before all the voters of Kansas City. And that petition was saying that the city shall not support any financial, give any financial support to the nuclear weapons parts plant. And we have attended many city council meetings, committee meetings. We've written letters to the editor as my letter and Dave Pack's letter appeared today. We bought space on billboards to project our message, etc. So, Cris, would you like to say a little about PeaceWorks and its beginning?
Sure. First, I do want to thank All Souls Forum for having this forum. When I first moved to Kansas City from St. Louis, this was the first discourse dialogue that I participated in. Of course, the meetings were in person, and I do appreciate All Souls for providing this discourse in Kansas City. It's really welcome. And for those that might not know, PeaceWorks started out in 1982, way back then, by 3 members of All Souls, Unitarian Universalist Church. And it was to focus on nuclear issues. PeaceWorks has a history of working over 30 years to abolish nuclear weapons and reorder our country's priorities away from militarism and toward meeting human needs. For movement buffs, and to some people this is important, PeaceWorks served as the Nuclear Weapons Freeze Committee of the Kansas City Interfaith Peace Alliance. That's what it was called, and became the Kansas City Nuclear Weapons Freeze Coalition. This was the metropolitan area's leading voice against nuclear arms. The name evolved to PeaceWorks Incorporated in 1990 and PeaceWorks Kansas City in 1996, which it is today. It's interesting to trace the origins of an organization to see its evolution. However, throughout the evolution, PeaceWorks Kansas City remained steadfast about eliminating nuclear weapons, and we also called for the shutdown of nuclear power plants. The news media have covered Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, and Fukushima nuclear power plants, but there are many, many workers at these plants and others that have been harmed, radiated, or killed just in handling the ordinary parts of their jobs. Both weapons production and nuclear energy production are hazardous to the health of workers and hazardous to the health of the communities they reside in. There are too many to mention, but I just want to, in the preparation for this discussion, I found it hard to believe that we've allowed the nuclear toxicity to be in our landscapes around the country. On December 5th, 1965, an A-4E aircraft accidentally rolled off the USS Ticonderoga with the loss of a pilot and 1 nuclear weapon. In Idaho Falls, at the National Reactor Testing Station, 3 men were killed as they moved fuel rods into a routine preparation for the reactor startup. 1 technician was blown to the ceiling of the containment dome and impaled on a control rod. His body had to remain there because it was heavily exposed to radiation, was taken down 6 days later. And the other men that were killed, their hands had to be cut off and buried separately with other radioactive waste. In 1982, the Critical Mass Energy Project of Public Citizen, which I think is with Ralph Nader, reported 84,322 power plant workers were exposed to radiation. And it was up from the previous year of 82,000. August 5th, 1950, a B-29 carrying Mark IV nuclear bombs crashed on takeoff from an Air Force base in California, killing 12 crew members and passengers. And this last episode is detailed in Eric Schlosser's Command and Control, Nuclear Weapons, the Damascus Accident, and the Illusion of Safety. An Air Force repairman doing a routine maintenance in a Titan II ICBM silo in Damascus, Arkansas, dropped a wrench socket, which rolled off a platform, fell to the bottom of the silo. The socket struck the missile, causing a leak from a pressurized fuel tank. The missile complex and surrounding areas were evacuated, and the fuel vapors then ignited and blew the whole thing up. These and many other nuclear-related accidents are reasons to support organizations like PeaceWorks. I'm hoping that in Henry's beginning message is not giving you the idea that if you become a member or go to an activity sponsored by PeaceWorks, that you will have to get arrested. Civil disobedience is not required. There are so many ways to help with this. You can sign up to do social media, be part of a committee. We have Action Committee, Communications Committee, and then the various regular activities that we do. We welcome people to do research on how the weapons industry can produce jobs that actually help the community rather than produce the mass killing implements. The skills needed for people to participate in any part of PeaceWorks are people who are convinced that a better world can be had, a world based on cooperation, the love of humanity, and the belief that when all people do better, all people indeed do better. I think Henry's going to continue telling us about civil disobedience.
Civil disobedience has a long and rich history. The Protestant Reformation challenged the existing power of the Catholic Church and certain monarchies. The Unitarian reform movement came out of that Protestant Reformation, and Minister Kendall Gibbons has a whole program on that. Our American Revolution was a challenge to the rule of King George III, and we don't like to even admit we were part of a revolution. This was not just something that independently evolved in some ways. And so you look at our Declaration of Independence, and it has like a long list of grievances as to why we should not be part of England and why the situation was intolerable. We have the history of the abolitionist movement who were to free slaves, and they in effect forced Abraham Lincoln to take a position on slavery. And then taking that position, and there was the Civil War, and after the war there were the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, which tried to undo that slavery that was in our original Constitution, our original sin. The suffragette movement got the women the right to vote, and some of them went to jail and suffered abuses. Gandhi was very active in liberating India from the British Empire. And as a result of Gandhi's activities, we saw in the 1960s all these African nations that were under the empire of England and France and other countries all become independent. And we've had the civil rights movement, of course, with Martin Luther King, which is very important to our country. You know, farm workers movement, the anti-war movement that had a big effect on bringing a close to the Vietnam War, LGBTQ plus movements. So civil rights is embedded in our country. And just recently, Howard Zinn was quoted as saying, "Protest beyond the law is not a departure from democracy. It is absolutely essential to it because it raises these important issues and forces the public to deal with them." Now, I use the word risking arrest because it's really up to the weapons parts manufacturing plant to have us arrested. We go to the site, we take a few steps over the line. I have communicated with them in advance, often by phone and by email, and therefore they know the date, the time, the place, what is happening with a particular walk, what time we are arriving. And so in some ways, they give us a forum. But I want to also point out that last Tuesday in the Kansas City Star, there was the comics Rubes. And it was kind of like in the form of Jeopardy, saying eternal questions for 1,000, a topic that philosophers have pondered for ages. And then the answer was, and these are like 4 people like on a mountaintop individually. And the answer was, what is the meaning of life? But below the cartoon, it said existential jeopardy. And that's precisely what we are talking about right now and why it is so important with these weapons of mass destruction existing. We are all in jeopardy. We all are intertwined. This is no longer a situation where you can be in one country and safe because you have oceans or whatever. We've had volcanic action that circles the globe in 3 days' time. Nuclear contaminants will circle the globe. So you end up asking, why does Henry risk arrest? Well, yes, I have a First Amendment right to, hold up signs at the plant and other locations saying, I oppose, or you should do this or this. And it's all good and well. But in this way, by crossing the line, we are confronting this system of mass destruction. And we are interacting with a legal system that, talks about justice and, the proper order of things. So we need really a case and controversy to be in court. Sometimes in the past, when as an attorney, and I have represented these 150 persons that have crossed the line, and I would work out a deal with the prosecutor about community service and whatever, some judges would say, no, your client cannot talk because you've already worked out a deal. It's between the prosecutor and the attorney and whatever. So more recently, we end up getting arrested and we end up asking for a trial. And so we have a situation where 4 persons are going to go to trial later this week on the 18th. And this is down at Kansas City Municipal Court, Courtroom A at 1:30. There will be a rally beforehand at the Islas Davis Park. And then the following week, and that was February the 18th. And then the following week on February the 23rd, my trial comes up at 1:30. That's a Wednesday, and it's in courtroom G. So again, we are taking, these actions because we feel compelled to do something. And you've heard the term, we want to be bold, we want to be open, we want to be truthful with what the situation is, but we want good trouble, because in the past, things have changed when people have engaged in good trouble. You just look at what has happened to all of the minorities, all of the persons that have not had a voice. They have acted up, and they have enriched our country. We do these actions on Memorial Day, and at the very beginning, back 10 years ago, we would walk from the old plant to the new plant, and that was like 9 or 10 miles away. And we are older, like I'm 73, and there's some older persons there, and we're really no longer able within a 4-hour period to cover the 9 or 10 miles that far. But anyway, because the workers have become ill and died, and also there were workers that were near the weapons plant. They worked for IRS, they worked for the Marine Finance Department, they worked for the Department of Agriculture. And so we do like a memorial to them. We do a die-in where a person reads the name of a particular worker, says his name, his age, what he died of. And so this may be, you may not be ready for this, but I am inviting you and your friends to join us this coming May the 30th, 2022, for our action at the National Security Plant about risking arrest. It's my hope and dream that possibly 100 or 200 or so persons will step a few steps across the line to make a statement to our community that it is not tolerable. There is no future in this destructive arms race that will get us, all of us, killed. And so we all have like an investment. So Cris, would you like to carry on for a bit?
I would. I wanted to share that in preparing for this discussion today, I ran into a book. It's a pamphlet, The Simple Art of Murder, Anti-Personnel Weapons and Their Developers. It's a pamphlet published by the National Action Research on Military Industrial Complex, 1972. It's a project of the American Friends Service Committee. And there was an ad in there that said, bullets aren't enough. The Army wants to be able to riddle the enemy with little darts. And there was another one that referred to, we don't want to just wound the enemy. We want to get them ready for the undertaker. I mean, these were ads in 1972 to advertise the new sophisticated weapons that were coming. And through this, I wanted to clarify that PeaceWorks is against all war, the ground wars. And we have a member on our board, Mary Hladky. She is the mother of an infantry officer who served in Afghanistan. And she writes recently, she said, there are 140 million poor and low wealth people in the United States. Our infrastructure is crumbling. COVID has exposed tremendous faults within our healthcare system, and we need to address the climate crisis. Let's demand that our government listen to the people who prefer, in vast numbers, investment in America and its people. No more war. So PeaceWorks opposes all wars as well as nuclear weapons. So with that, we ally ourselves with social justice groups who do share these same perspectives. We work with local and national groups who share our outlook and program, both at home and abroad, in an all-encompassing demand for peace. For example, we ally with Kansas Poor People's Campaign. Many people have heard of the Poor People's Campaign. In Kansas, it unites people across all walks of life to challenge the evils of the system, racism, poverty, the war economy, ecological devastation, and the nation's distorted morality of religious nationalism. The Poor People's Campaign carries with it strong programmatic platform against war and militarism. PeaceWorks partners with Kansas City Green Party. The Green Party in the United States not only has an extensive platform for social justice and climate change, but long-standing positions on banning nuclear weapons and an end to all war. It's a key value of the Greens is nonviolence. We work with Grandparents Against Gun Violence, which holds fast to the belief that all people have a right to feel safe in their communities from gun violence. There is a strong connection between violence domestically and violence abroad. Martin Luther King pointed that out when he observed that the United States is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. Another organization that really stands out in the medical public health field is Physicians for Social Responsibility, or PSR. This group amplified the health professional voice to increase and broaden grassroots support for nuclear weapons abolition and to cultivate legislative initiatives to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons. Here's what they say. They say a medical response to a nuclear attack would be inadequate. Any use of nuclear weapons would have devastating health, humanitarian, and environmental consequences. PSR also supports, along with other international health federations, including World Medical Association, International Federation of Red Cross, International Council of Nurses, and World Federation of Public Health Associations. They all support the nuclear weapons ban treaty on the basis that a meaningful medical response to any use of nuclear weapons would be impossible. PeaceWorks also affiliates with Peace Action. Peace Action is the largest sort of coalition that exists that's against nuclear weapons and nuclear war. Lastly, we partner with ICAN. ICAN is the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. It's a coalition of non-governmental organizations promoting the adherence to and implementation of the United Nations Nuclear Weapon Ban Treaty. I would encourage everybody here, I did enjoy it in prepping for this discussion, a visit to ICANN's website. It's www.icanw.org. There you will find the latest information on the treaty for the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. There's a report that was launched recently. 101 financial institutions are restricting investments in nuclear weapons. And this is the result of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. At our holiday party, so now you know PeaceWorks has holiday parties, we heard from a Pittsburgh organizer, Reverend Paul Dordell, about the effects that an activist group has in Pittsburgh called Banking the Bomb. And these activists are undertaking this to encourage divestment, to encourage banks and businesses to get away from the very risky business of nuclear weapons. And with the help of grants and donations, PeaceWorks, we did organize to have 4 billboards when the treaty became enforced around the city here. And I'll speak later more about the treaty for the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. So, Henry, back to you.
Thank you. So the primary thing is, please do not be indifferent. Your lives are at stake. Cris has given you many ideas about ways that you can interact. We are all a web of concerned citizens. We can be the peacemakers. As that letter to the editor says today, make peace, not war. And I think it's just amazing that 59 countries have signed on to the Treaty for Abolition of Nuclear Weapons. And this is not just a formality. In signing on, they say that they will not allow nuclear weapons on their territory. They will not be engaged in making, manufacturing, distributing, or in any way participating. So it is a true boycott, and we are hoping that more nations will join that. They are going to have a large forum later this year, and NATO countries have been hesitant about this treaty because they are like a joint arms, treaty. However, Norway and Germany are going to be coming to the international session to hear out. And in the past, I wrote to Angela Merkel to say, please, sign on, be a leader as you are in many aspects. I want to jump to, I think that because some of the persons in the forums, including myself, are Unitarian Universalists, we have these 7 major principles that guide us. And we try to live out, the moral and values of this. And when you end up looking at these principles, it is the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equality, compassion in human relations, accepting one another, free and responsible search for truth, the right of conscience, the goal of a world community with peace, justice, and liberty for all, and respecting that we are interdependent. Let me just say, Spencer likes to call us scofflaws, and that is habitual and flagrant violators of the law. Yes, we are rebels with a cause. We do respect the law. It's not every law that we challenge, but it's the institutions that can destroy all life on this planet. These weapons would do indiscriminate injury and death. Women, children, non-combatants. It does not respect or discriminate in any way. We are principled actors. We act in nonviolence. We come to court. We try to have our say. We are not the rioters of January the 6th that, claim themselves to be patriots and whatever. But we are alive and active in the great issues of the day, and nuclear weapons and the possibility of destruction is part of that principle. And I'm just gonna stop here and let Cris carry on, because there may be some limitation of time. Cris?
Yeah, I don't know if other people are surprised at this, but I read that nuclear weapons engineers and workers, in some respects, they are given the information that by making the nuclear weapons, they are keeping the peace. Nuclear weapons are viewed as deterrents. And in 2017, over 1,000 nuclear weapons were deployed on high alert by accident. We know that a disturbing number of accidents, close calls, and near catastrophes, that there was near catastrophes since 1945, and many more remain secret information. History shows that conflicts can escalate rapidly and unpredictably. National leaders do not always act rationally and prudently, and neither do we. I mean, personally, communications can break down. High tensions will amplify misunderstandings. And so the long use of nuclear weapons, much of it is due solely to good luck so far, which can't be expected to last forever. The risk of nuclear weapons being used, whether deliberately or by accident or miscalculation, is real. Only 9 countries have nuclear weapons, and around 30 other countries claim to be dependent on them through military alliances. This means that over 150 countries have decided they can provide their national security without nuclear weapons, even if other countries have them. Kazakhstan, South Africa, and Ukraine once possessed nuclear weapons but chose to give them up. Brazil, Sweden, and Switzerland, among others, started developing nuclear weapons but decided not to proceed. Mexico is also in that. What difference does this treaty make to the nuclear-armed countries? The best answer about the impact of a ban on nuclear weapons on nuclear-armed states comes from the nuclear-armed states themselves. They have bitterly opposed the TPNW from the outset. They are still lobbying countries around the world not to join the treaty, and they even badgered the Pope against speaking out against nuclear weapons. Coming back to our nurses and physicians again, nuclear weapons cause catastrophic harm. In Hiroshima, 90% of physicians and nurses were killed or injured. 42 out of 45 hospitals were rendered non-functional, and 70% of the victims had combined injuries, in most cases severe burns. All dedicated burn beds around the world would be insufficient to care for the survivors of just that blast. In other words, there's not enough. Well, all the hospitals were wiped out, 42 out of 45. In Hiroshima and Nagasaki, most victims died without any care to ease their suffering. And most of those who entered the cities after the bombings to provide assistance died from radiation. Ira Helfman, he's the co-chair of Nuclear Weapons Abolition Committee. He's an emergency medicine physician from Massachusetts. In a TED Talk on January 26, 2016, stated, "We built these weapons. We know how to take them apart. This is our choice. Non-nuclear weapons countries are taking the lead, 140 countries. Once you know of the danger, you have the responsibility to change this. We have an opportunity to save the earth." And then our board member, Mary Labke, again writes, "Instead of the government trying to dominate and control the world, it needs to learn how to live within the world. Implement diplomacy and negotiations, give and take, to build a livable world for all. Redirect military funding to investment in America and its people. It is extremely dangerous to provoke a war with Russia over Ukraine. We must remember that the US and Russia are the two countries with the world's most nuclear weapons. The US sending troops, weapons, and funding in support of Ukraine is escalating the tensions, stumbling into a war where at some point supposedly limited usable nuclear weapons might be used that would be disastrous. The use of nuclear weapons, weapons that kill men, women, children, all living things, and disintegrates infrastructure while sending massive amounts of soot into the atmosphere, possibly setting off a nuclear winter, is simply nuts. That's why I like Mary. She says it like it is. It's simply nuts. Take these words from Mary and Ira to heart. Help PeaceWorks assist sounding the alarm in our community that death and destruction of our planet and people is an unacceptable risk.
Thanks, Henry and Cris. We have been listening to Henry Stover and Cris Mann, co-chairs of PeaceWorks Kansas City, discussing resisting nuclear armament in 2022. Now, for those who have questions, Michael Hoy.
Yes, how is PeaceWorks Kansas City working with the peace community in Kansas City that's not anti-war?
We do have events, for example, we and Vets for Peace, or we at the Interfaith Ministers Group. We have attended each other's events. I have been on a national forum for the Green Party. So we are concerned about the environment, very much so, because it is also a great thing that could, doom us from living. But Cris, you might, I belong to the Grandparents Against Gun Violence, and Cris belongs to other groups, and we interact with Community of Christ, and I interact with some Quakers and so forth. But Cris, do you have maybe some additional information?
I'm still trying to understand Michael's question. Are you meaning social justice groups, or are you meaning the groups I outlined? We sort of ally with and do activity with, but I mentioned some of the groups you're talking about.
I'm mentioning like Park University's peace journalism, that they're not really anti-war, but they do promote peace. Those are the groups that I'm thinking of. The peace conference that happens every year with Abla University and Johnson County Community College and Park University.
I think we actually give scholarships to students who are in those programs, especially Avila. So we've had regular recipients for students that intern with us and exchange activities, and we do attend all those activities. Yeah.
Michael, Ann Swellentrop has several times gone up to Park College to speak and to take questions from particular classes. And we have friends who are involved with Avila and the Peace Minor that they have there. But yes, I think, all social concern groups should interact and provide leadership to our community and be involved with the gun violence in our community. But that was a good question.
Yeah, and I also participate in Moms Demand Action to be able to control guns here. But if that's anyone here's niche, we would welcome you to come and extend that and to work with students at the different campuses. That would be appreciated. But we do have those scholarship opportunities.
Right, and I think both Mary Halad, you mentioned the annual peace conference organized by Park University, and I think it's also Johnson County Community College, I think. I spoke at their conference one year, and Ann has spoken at their conferences on other years, and Sulentrop. Cris, you had some other things that you were about to say when I cut you off.
Oh, that's all right. I was just going to end with Mary's quotation about this is that I did want to mention that there are more nuclear weapons now than were in the Cold War, and that I agree with Mary, it's nuts. The situation is nuts.
Indeed, I would add that I've done a moderate amount of research on this, inspired by Daniel Ellsberg's book on the Doomsday Machine, and he basically says that if there's a nuclear war between the U.S. and Russia, you'll have like 1,000 cities incinerated with nuclear weapons, over 1,000. There's 1,000 Hiroshimas generating so much smoke that raising to the stratosphere that it circles the globe, like Henry said, leading to a nuclear winter during which for several years the surface temperature of the earth will rarely get above freezing on many parts of the world, leading to the deaths from starvation of 98% of humanity if they do not die of something else sooner. So that's kind of, I think Ellsberg is overstating the case. I think we could theoretically have a nuclear war that stopped short of that. A nuclear war between India and Pakistan would only involve perhaps 100 or 200 Hiroshimas and produce maybe a nuclear autumn rather than a nuclear winter, according to Ira Helfand of the Physicians for Social Responsibility that Cris mentioned earlier. And Helfand says that in that scenario, the nuclear autumn, only a quarter of humanity, a couple of billion souls, would starve to death if they do not die of something else sooner. So that's not nearly as grim, right, as the 98% that Ellsberg talked about, but it's still pretty serious, and it's not simply a handful of folks like of extremists. There are what's affectionately known as the four horsemen of the nuclear apocalypse, which are Henry Kissinger and George Shultz, two former secretaries of state, Republican, William Perry, who was Secretary of Defense under Bill Clinton, and Sam Nunn, who was former senator and Cold Warrior. All of them have said repeatedly that as the president said, a nuclear war cannot be won and should never be fought. But Perry in particular has talked about the risk of an accidental nuclear war is much higher than the risk of us actually being attacked. Okay, the risk of yeah, I'm sorry, you were about to say something, Henry?
Yes. You know, recently the 5 nuclear powers, the leaders released a joint statement that a nuclear war would never be winnable and should never be used. And yet the Kansas City National Security Campus has about 6,000 employees, an annual budget of $1.2 billion. And these weapons continue to be modernized and made. So there is a hypocrisy when these leaders, Russia, China, United States, England, and France, say, you know, that we should never, ever engage in a nuclear war. Well, what are they making these for? And we all want to move the money. We want to move the money to help those that are the least capable. I mean, I would applaud a social worker visiting every household in this city to see about educational level, about mental health, about, you know, food resources and whatever. We could truly be a community that would solve its own problems if we moved the money and we made peace instead of war.
Okay, so I think we're about out of time. I should like to give our speakers an opportunity for one brief final comment.
I'd just like everybody to keep in mind that there's no Hiroshima-sized weapons. That they're all much greater than the power made in 1945. Every weapon is 6, 8, 10 times the size and the power of destruction. And it's the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists put the clock for an accident or a misfire, like I went back and read about the nuclear bombs falling off planes. One fell off a truck and the truck driver didn't realize till he reached his destination that it was missing. There's all kinds of hazards with this potential destruction, and we should recognize it. We should recognize it for what it is and speak up.
Yes, Henry?
There is no future in these nuclear weapons, or else it will all get us killed. And so we must be peace to all. We must be hope in the actions we do. We must be a witness to what is possible, for we truly believe that peace is possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wish to thank our audience for joining this episode of All Souls Forum. Henry Stover and Cris Mann, co-chairs of PeaceWorks Kansas City, have been discussing resisting nuclear armament in 2022.